I knew my wife was stealing from me the exact second she put my wallet back 2 inches to the left. Not crooked, not obvious, just off. To most people, it would be nothing. To me, someone who hunts digital thieves for a living, it was a flare on a midnight road. My name is Ethan Cole. I'm 33 and I make a living catching people who take money that isn't theirs. I've spent a decade tracing wire transfers through shell companies, reverse engineering bogus payments, and flagging transactions that don't smell right even when every number lines up. I consult for Helios Sentinel Labs, a cybersecurity firm out of Florida, where I help design the kind of monitoring systems that make fraudsters believe ghosts are following their money. It's slow, precise work. You learn to notice when a decimal point has the wrong kind of smudge, or when your own wallet sits 2 inches to the left. Looking for the grocery receipt, Marissa said, holding my leather billfold in both hands like it might break. She smiled the way she does when she knows she shouldn't be doing something. You know how I get about the budget. The receipts are on the fridge, I said, toweling off my hair. Under the blue magnet. She didn't glance at the fridge. Right. Must have slipped my mind. We lived in a stucco box in Clearwater, a place that looked like it was printed from a catalog labeled Coastal Aspirations. It was bright and white and a little too expensive. Marissa loved it, which meant I loved that she loved it, which is how people like us end up paying for things we don't need with money that isn't there. Her older sister, Lila, lived 15 minutes away in a waterfront palace and treated life like a curated brochure. Trips to St. Tropez, hand-stitched Italian shoes, champagne in the afternoon, just because. The orbit around Lila had gravity. You didn't so much keep up as get pulled. Marissa set my wallet back on the counter and kissed my cheek. I'm going to call my mom about Christmas plans. I watched her walk upstairs with her phone. Then I looked down at the counter. The wallet's edge didn't line up with the granite. I had placed it flush, parallel with the little vein of black stone I always use as a mark. It wasn't there. 2 inches to the left. I didn't accuse her. Not then. Accusation without proof just teaches a thief to hide better. And if Marissa was taking the first step, my job, my livelihood, had trained me for what came next. I opened the drawer where I keep the hardware clients never see, a nest of decoy cards and monitoring dongles, a burner phone, a stack of NFC tags. I chose a fresh card tied to a honeypot account, a sandbox balance that looked like real money but existed solely to observe. I loaded it with $60,000, enough to feel like success without tripping the bank's fraud wire by itself. I tied the account into the same telemetry we use to catch corporate embezzlers, device fingerprinting, velocity checks, geofencing, merchant category analytics, silent alerts that land on my wrist before the receipt prints. Then I put the card in my wallet in a slot where my everyday debit card usually lives. If she took it, I would know. If she used it, I would see everything. 3 days later, the card was gone. Marissa made eggs that morning, humming along with the radio. I might go out with Lila later, she said, sliding a plate toward me. She wants to hit the shops on Beach Drive. Nice, I said. Nothing crazy, she added. You know how I am about our budget. I smiled, because that's what you do when the person across the table is lying to you so easily it feels rehearsed. I met Marissa 4 years earlier in the kind of coffee shop with rough wood tables and a menu that insisted on explaining the farm's philosophy behind every bean. She worked part-time at a boutique on the edge of downtown St. Pete while finishing the last courses for her marketing degree. She teased me on the second date for talking about bank fraud like it was an art form. You're a detective, she said, her eyes bright. But for money. I could listen to this all night. I took that as admiration. I told myself it meant she saw me. I never wondered if it meant she was studying. The first alert hit my watch at 11:14 a.m. while I was in a client demo explaining how card-present transactions can be cloned at compromised terminals. The alert was not a simulation. It was my honeypot, live and spending. For $198.21, Lavelle and Company, Tampa, Florida, MCC 5651, family clothing stores. The second hit as I stepped into the hallway. $1,213.88, Maison Arcadia, Tampa, MCC 5944, jewelry/watch stores. By noon there were two more, $2,050 at a designer shoe boutique I knew from a previous case. Their POS was a sieve until last year. And $1,610 at a shop whose Instagram feeds Lila had tagged a dozen times in the past month. Luxury retail has a signature pattern. The same streets, the same clusters of stores, the same slow creep upward as someone realizes no one is stopping them. At 2 or 3 p.m., the pattern changed from shopping to logistics. $4,197.43, Sable Voyages Travel, Tampa, MCC 4722, travel agencies. 2 first-class tickets on an overnight flight to Paris. Names attached, M. Cole and A. Naismith. A name I didn't recognize. I sat in my car in the December glare and watched the numbers march. Hotels in the first arrondissement. A boutique on Rue Saint-Honoré whose doorman had once refused to let me inside on a case because my shoes weren't questionably expensive. A cluster of purchases around the Place Vado that read like a catalog of regret. I could have stopped it. I could have frozen the card and called her to ask why she was committing a felony. But stopping it would have only netted me a lie, and lies are terrible evidence. An investigator's job isn't to prevent crimes you can't prosecute, but to document the ones someone thinks you'll never see. That night, she packed a suitcase while I watched a basketball game with the sound off. Lila invited me to a spa weekend, she said from the hallway. Last minute. She booked everything. That's generous. Her treat. She paused like she wanted me to ask which spa, but I just nodded. We'll probably be gone until Tuesday. I carried the suitcase to the trunk and hugged her. The scent of her shampoo was the same as the day we met. She shut the trunk. Don't stay up too late reading, she said, which is the kind of line that lands differently when you know the person saying it is boarding a plane without you. 34 minutes later, the card paid for long-term airport parking. Overnight flights do something strange to time. You wake up inside someone else's morning. By dawn, my watch was buzzing like a nervous insect. €213 at a cafe near the Tuileries, €2,480 at a leather goods store with staff who talk in low voices like they're guarding state secrets, €4,900 at a jeweler where the receipts look like wedding invitations. It would have been impressive if it wasn't mine. At 9:08 a.m. local, my phone rang. Cole, Ethan, it's Naomi Brooks. Her voice, steady and clipped, belongs to the Financial Crimes Task Force inside DHS. We've worked a half-dozen cases together. One of your monitored accounts just lit up half our board. High-velocity international luxury spend on a domestic profile. I'm aware, I said. This is personal, she guessed. It's controlled, I said. Honeypot wallet. Controlled doesn't mean harmless. More than 50,000 across borders pings EDD and AML triggers. She sighed. Look, I'm not asking you to explain your marriage to me, but if she keeps this up, we'll have no choice. Customs will tag her on return. She thinks she's using my money, I said. I need the full scope. Make sure you need it enough to like the ending, Naomi said, and hung up. By the third day, the pattern was textbook, morning coffee and pastries at a place that calls espresso, short black, early afternoon shopping, late dinner at a restaurant that will salt your steak with someone's 3 words of French. Mixed among the purchases were a few things that didn't fit Lila's aesthetic at all. A museum gift shop, a narrow bookstore in the Latin Quarter, a taxi to an apartment nowhere near a hotel district. The passenger name A. Naismith appeared again on an online booking tied to the bait card, a private tour with a luxury driver. I checked the passport flight manifest. The seat next to hers had indeed been occupied by a man named Aaron Naismith, age 34, no criminal record, little public footprint, someone who knew how to live like a ghost. Do you know him? Naomi asked when I mailed her the manifest. No. I watched the incoming stream of charges paint a map of 2 people being whoever they wanted as long as someone else paid for it. But I'm going to. On Friday, while Marissa was buying a silk scarf roughly the price of my first car, Naomi called again. Ethan, I pulled a deeper history. Your wife's not new to this. What do you mean? Same pattern, different funding sources. Milan last spring, Barcelona in the summer, London 2 autumns ago. None with cards in her name. Corporate accounts, ex-roommates, people with weirdly secure passwords printed on little sticky notes. I shut my eyes and saw Lila's Instagram grid, the smiling photos in cities Marissa had lied about not caring to visit, the captions about girls' weekend and quality time, the likes from friends who believed the filtered version of everything. Whose cards? Working on it, Naomi said, but one of them looks like her boutique's corporate card. She paused. Ethan, I don't think she fell into this. I think she studied how to do it. From me, I said, before I could stop the thought from escaping. From asking me how my systems worked. What triggers flags? How banks categorize risk. I can't speak to motive, Naomi said gently. I can only see the behavior. And the behavior says she's been doing this for a while. After the call, I walked into our bedroom, opened the drawer where Marissa keeps the things she thinks I never look at, and found the jewelry box with the false bottom. Underneath a tangle of necklaces sat a slim notebook, its pages filled with meticulous handwriting. Names, 16-digit numbers, expirations, CVVs. Notes, Florence, luggage only, use small purchases first, call to pre-authorize. The last page had a list of cities and totals. Paris in neat ink at the bottom, the numbers still climbing. I sat on the edge of the bed with the little book open in my palms, the weight of it more than paper. There are 1,000 ways to feel betrayed. Few of them feel as precise as seeing your wife's handwriting listing other people's money like grocery items. Marissa called that night from a restaurant with plates that looked like art. Ethan, the duck here, my God. And the cream buns? I cried. I literally cried. I feel like the world finally makes sense. Glad you're enjoying yourself, I said, and my voice came out so calm that I hated it. We'll be home Sunday, she said. I've got the perfect present for you. I bet, I said. Sunday afternoon, Naomi called with logistics. We'll flag her at passport control as a routine secondary screening. Customs will ask for receipts and proof of purchase authorization. It will be polite. It will feel like a long 10 minutes. What do you need from me? Truth, she said. And presence. We'll likely need you to confirm you didn't authorize these charges. I showed up at Tampa International early, sat in a chair where I could see the glass doors from passport control. Travelers drifted into Florida sunlight with the stunned blink of people re-entering gravity. When Marissa walked out, pulling a rose gold suitcase that hummed over tile, she spotted me like a child spots the home base and tag, relief, and triumph in a single breath. Hey, she said, walking fast. You're here. Secondary, an officer said kindly and guided her into a room with frosted windows. 10 minutes later, Naomi cracked the door and nodded me in. The room looked like every interview room I've ever sat in. Neutral paint, neutral chairs, neutral truth. On the table, Customs had arranged her new purchases in careful rows. A stack of receipts lay beside them like a flattened diary. The officer across from Marissa wore a patient expression. Naomi sat slightly off to the side, an observer who could become a storm at a signal. We're just verifying, she said to me, tone easy. The officer turned the laptop screen toward Marissa. Can you confirm this is your husband's card? Yes, she said. He told me I could use it. The officer tapped a key. An authorization window filled the screen with my name and a photo of my signature. Mr. Cole, I did not give permission for any of these transactions, I said. The room became very quiet. Marissa's eyes flicked from my face to Naomi's, to the receipts, to the blue and white box with a logo anyone with a phone would recognize. You can call Lila, Marissa said, trying for airy. She planned the trip. Naomi folded her hands. We did. Lila thought you were at a spa in Sarasota last year the same weekend you were in Milan. Marissa's mouth opened, then closed. I watched the calculation hit her eyes, the grid of lies she would try, the columns of stories that would balance if only no one asked for the ledger. What's happening, she said, and now her voice had a tremor, is my husband is punishing me for spending money he said I could spend. I felt something in my chest that might have been grief or might have been a door closing. Naomi kept her voice soft. Marissa, do you have any other cards on you? No, she said. Naomi looked at the officer and then at me. Would you mind checking her handbag, Mr. Cole? I did mind. I minded profoundly. But I reached into her designer bag and found near the bottom a flat packet the size of a paperback. Inside, stacked like playing cards, were 6 credit cards in other people's names. One of the names belonged to her boutique's corporate card, Elisa's Store, the place where Marissa had been trusted with access to customers who paid more for a jacket than I spend on monthly groceries. The arrest was quiet. No shouting, no drama, just the firm rearrangement of a life that had been moving toward this moment for months. As they led her away, she turned back toward me with an expression I didn't recognize: panic, maybe, or the sharp shock of a strategy gone wrong. "Ethan," she said, "this isn't what you think." "It's exactly what I think," I said, and I think I meant both the crimes and the years of small lies that got us here. Her one phone call came an hour later. "Ethan," she said, the metal echo of the holding room making her voice sound like someone else's. "Tell them you gave me permission. Tell them it was authorized and we can go home." "I'm not going to lie for you," I said. "You told me how this works," she said, the words tumbling fast now. "You taught me. This is your fault." Something in me went very still. I thought of the notebook under the jewelry box false bottom, the years of copied numbers and cleanly written totals. I thought of every dinner where she asked just one more question about how fraud filters decide what to flag. "You had a choice," I said. "So did you," she snapped. "You chose your job over us." "I chose not to steal from people," I said, and hung up. The arraignment took place 2 days later in the federal courthouse, where the ceilings are too high and the lighting makes everyone look tired. I sat in the second row behind the rail. Naomi nodded at me from the aisle, her expression the same professional straight line she uses when explaining to executives why their money went on vacation without them. The prosecutor read the charges with the detached cadence of someone setting items on a conveyor belt: fraud, identity theft, wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, conspiracy to commit financial crimes, international transportation of stolen property. When the judge asked for the government's position on bail, the prosecutor shook his head. "We object, Your Honor. The defendant has ties to international travel associated with these charges and is a flight risk. Additionally, the nature and scope of the alleged offenses indicate an ongoing threat to the community." Marissa's attorney argued she had community ties: a husband, a job, a sister, a mother. The prosecutor replied by placing Marissa's notebook on the evidence cart with a soft thud that sounded louder than it should have, then entered my monitoring logs, every line of spending, every geolocation, every timestamp into the record. The judge's mouth compressed. "Bail is denied," she said, and moved to the next case. I walked out of the courthouse and stood in the Florida heat that feels like a hand on your chest. Naomi joined me on the sidewalk. "You did what you had to do," she said. "I did what my job taught me to do," I said. "I just never thought I'd have to use it in my house." We worked with her boutique's owner, Elise, over the next few weeks. Elise looked like someone who has built a small business by willpower and spreadsheets. "I trusted her with my store," she said, voice tight. We had regulars who paid by card, and she was always the one who remembered what they liked. I thought it was because she cared. She cared, I said, because I think that was true. She just cared in the wrong direction. 3 more victims came forward from the boutique alone. Others appeared as the case widened: a former roommate, an elderly neighbor whose card had funded a weekend in Barcelona, the boutique's corporate line. Each person came to the table with the same expression, a mix of embarrassment and relief: people who don't want to be fools, but do want their lives back. When the plea came, it was pragmatic. The evidence was heavy and methodical. Her attorney negotiated away some counts in exchange for a guilty plea to the ones that carried years. 8 years federal time, 3 years supervised release. Restitution set at an amount that made my throat close: over $400,000 to people whose lives had taken a detour while Marissa tried on different versions of herself in different cities. I moved out of the white stucco catalog house. It sold fast. These places always do when someone wants to buy the idea of themselves. I found a 1-bedroom near a lake, a place where the evening air smelled like wet leaves and the sound of tires on asphalt faded into crickets. I bought a couch that had never been sat on by anyone who lied to me and a coffee table with a scratch on the corner I put there myself. I updated every password, froze my credit, put a credit freeze and two-factor authentication on my mother's phone because she still writes down her PIN. I took a position with a fraud prevention team in Denver that needed someone who could explain complex systems to people who are tired and scared and don't believe the numbers ever tell the truth. The air there feels like a different country's idea of weather. I learned which coat to wear and how the mountains can make you feel like your stories are smaller than they seemed in Florida. The first time I taught a free class at the library, a Tuesday evening, the room smelling like carpet shampoo and fluorescent lighting, 24 people showed up. A woman in the front row asked how to protect her husband, who clicks every link that promises discounts on golf clubs. A high school teacher wanted to know how to talk to parents about social media scams. An exhausted nurse told me she had put off opening her mail for months after a fraudulent medical bill wrecked her trust in paper. This isn't your fault, I told them. Fraud isn't about being stupid. It's about someone else making a decision that your life is easier to use than their own. They asked how I knew. I told them I work in the field. I didn't tell them about the 2 inches to the left. I did what I could for the people Marissa hurt, helped fill out recovery forms, wrote statements, sat with Elise while she called regulars to tell them their cards might be compromised. I spoke at a state bar association seminar about digital evidence in domestic financial crimes. I answered emails from a sister in grief who had to untangle bills sent to a dead mother because someone had opened a credit line in that mother's name while she was in hospice. I stayed on the phone until the nurse on the other end cried quietly and said thank you. Thank you, thank you. Marissa wrote me 2 letters from the federal facility in Tallahassee. The first said she was sorry for the misunderstanding, which is a fascinating phrase to use for grand larceny. The second said she had been pushed into it by the pressure of living in Lila's shadow, that she had learned too much from me about how systems work. I read them both. I didn't write back. Months later, Naomi called. We picked him up, she said. Who? The ghost on the plane. Naismith. He wasn't just a passenger. He was a co-conspirator on 3 other cases. They thought they were invisible. We had their pattern. People who do this always have a pattern. I thanked her. I wasn't sure for what. Maybe for confirming that the shadow next to my wife had a name and a history and would now have a file. There's a particular kind of evening in Denver where the light turns thin and blue and makes the city look like it's remembering a story from long ago. On one of those evenings, I was standing in line at a bakery that sells bread with hard crusts when my phone buzzed, a fraud alert from a client whose CFO had started buying flights at 2 a.m. under a nickname. The work, that part of my life, still gives me the satisfaction of a problem with an answer. I called the client, stopped the bleeding, wrote the incident report that would become a policy that would become a habit. Later, I sat on my balcony with a mug of tea and listened to the highway's hush. I thought about the kitchen counter in Clearwater, the 2 inches to the left that changed everything. I thought about the dozen little moments that make up a betrayal, the finger on a card, the questions asked like curiosity, the way someone can smile at you while writing down numbers that don't belong to them. People ask me sometimes if I feel revenge. I don't know that I do. Revenge is loud in movies. In real life, it's quieter. It's a living room where everything is where you left it. It's a morning where your wallet sits flush to the granite and no one touches it who shouldn't. It's getting a call from Elise saying, we're okay. We updated our procedures. Thank you. It's the nurse who writes, I took your advice, I froze my credit, and I slept last night. It's teaching a class where someone in the back raises a hand and says, how do you know when something's wrong? And you answer, when something is 2 inches to the left, and they laugh, and then they don't, and then they write it down. I met someone in Denver. Her name is Harper. She runs a nonprofit that helps people expunge records for crimes they committed when they were young and stupid and unlucky. She knows what I do. I told her early. It felt like making sure the furniture in my life lined up with the right vein in the countertop. We walk in the mornings when the air still smells like night. She asks questions, but not the kind that feel like homework. When I showed her the scratch on my coffee table, I told her I put it there by accident, and she said, then it's yours. Sometimes I wonder what version of my former life would have kept going if I hadn't noticed the wallet. How long the Paris trips would have continued. How many people would have paid for our house without knowing they did. Wondering doesn't change anything. We get the lives we pay attention to. Once a month, Naomi texts me an update about the restitution fund. It will take years. It always does. Frauds scale fast and pay back slow. But checks arrive, and sometimes a thank you card arrives with them, and I pin those cards on a corkboard by my desk, reminders that numbers represent breath and rent and groceries, and the way a person measures safety. Whenever I hear a story about a budget-minded spouse who just had a bad week and needed a little retail therapy, I think about the ledger in the jewelry box, the meticulous columns, the neat script. Theft isn't chaos. It's accounting with different morals. I kept the notebook. The government copied every page, but they returned the original after the case closed because it wasn't contraband, it was paper. I could have burned it. Maybe I should have. But I keep it in a safe in my office under a stack of documents labeled best practices. Not as a souvenir. As a lesson, patterns tell the truth. And sometimes the pattern you miss is the one sitting in your kitchen, setting your wallet down where it doesn't belong. If you're listening to this because you like revenge stories, the revenge here is simple and unglamorous. It's systems that worked. It's evidence that didn't blink. It's the fact that a person who studied my job to learn how to get away with it forgot the first thing I teach in every seminar. The system is not your enemy. The story you tell yourself to excuse your behavior is. A year after the arrest, I stood in line at a coffee shop in Denver that tries a little too hard, the kind of place with chalkboard signs that say things like, "Roasted with love." A man in front of me paid with a credit card and left without his receipt. The barista tucked the slip under the register's clip. I looked at the card reader and thought about how easy it is to take what isn't yours, and how hard it is for a person to admit that's what they've become. I put my wallet on the counter, flush with the edge. Paid. Put it back in my pocket without looking at the receipt. Walked out into the cold with a hot cup and a life that felt correctly aligned. 2 inches to the right. Exactly where I put it. Exactly where it should be.